Hey guys, alright, this is out of the self-sufficient backyard, and this is on Chapter 5, Homestead Water, Drilled Wells and Hand Pumps. And this is just going to be the first video out of this chapter, because this chapter is pretty long, so here we go. The lifeblood of any homestead is a reliable water source, isn't that the truth? It is vital for your homestead's success. Not only will your survival depend on a safe, adequate supply of water, but if you are considering animals, they too will rely on their daily drink. I personally would not do any construction unless I was assured I had a dependable water source. There are any number of water sources a homestead could utilize. A spring, a drilled or dug well, even a river, lake, or stream could be your source. Excuse me. Perhaps a cistern system that captures rainwater or a holding tank system for water that is delivered to you by truck or other possibilities. I may still try to set up a rainwater catchment system, even out here, just as for extra water.
You're the guest.
We're all striving to be self-reliant, so I would think long and hard about having a homestead that relies on a water delivery. Being dependent on someone to deliver water for my existence seems like a bad idea to me. Definitely, especially in a grid-down situation. Personally, I have experience with drilled wells, hand-dug wells, machine-dug wells, and sucking water directly out of a lake. Each has advantages and disadvantages. I would locate my well relatively close to the home, especially if you will be hand pumping and lugging buckets of water into the house. If you plan on a barn, a compromise might be in order. Locate the well within easy reach of both house and barn. Not only will it make bucketing water easier, but if you ever plan to install a pump, your pipe and electrical runs from the well to your house will be shorter. A drilled well relies on a heavy piece of equipment to bore a hole in the ground. There are different methods of drilling, rotary and percussion, and since I'm no expert, relying on the local well drilling company who has the expertise is best. It's also expensive. They will have the experience to give you a good idea of how deep the well needs to go for a particular location, as well as the water quality that can be expected. The important thing is that they drill deep enough so you have adequate water even in the driest season. The best time to dig or search for water is during a dry spell. The water table will have dropped, and when you have hit water, you will have increased your chances of having that precious liquid even in a drought. Good, yeah, it makes sense. My first water source was a drilled well back in my early homesteading years in Maine. I believe it went down several hundred feet, but the water table was quite high, with water generally being within 10 feet of the surface. To pump out water, I chose a new deep well hand pump to install over the well casing. The casing is simply a piece of steel pipe that goes down a distance into the ground to protect the well from infiltration of surface contaminants. It keeps unclean surface water out of the potable water supply. As long as you have access to the well casing, you can get access to water regardless of whether you have an electric service or not. And that's what I want out here is the hand pump. That's something to keep in mind if the power grid goes down. Exactly. If you don't have a hand pump, there's another option in that event. There are slim catchment tubes called well buckets. They may be lowered down into the well casing via a rope. They open, fill with water, and then when the rope is pulled to raise it, the bucket closes, keeping the water trapped until released onto the surface in your bucket. Of course, if you have well crocks in a dug well, a bucket tied to a rope that is tossed down the well will work in a pinch too. Lugging a heavy bucket up by hand would get old in a hurry, so if that process needed to be done for any duration, I'd build a small framework with a handle and a windlass. The hand pump I installed in Maine was the type often seen in old farmsteads. It was a reliable method of pumping water which worked perfectly right up to our move 20 years later. For many years, I hand pumped and then lugged buckets of water into the house as needed. Not that big a deal unless it was pouring rain or there was a raging snowstorm and 20 below temperatures. Ah, the good old days back in Maine. A quick word about pumps. A myriad of different pumps exist for water systems, and they come in manual, mechanical, or electrical operation. A pump can either push water or lift water. A deep water hand pump pushes water, whereas a shallow well pump lifts water. We've had both types. Each type has its application and use. Theoretically, you can only suck and lift water 33.9 feet high vertical distance. Realistically, around 21 feet of lift is a more practical number. A pitcher pump, a shallow well type of pump, relies on your water lift number depending on how much suction the pump can generate in your elevation. Elevation refers to how high above sea level you are. Sometimes the only way to tell is to install the pump and see how it performs. There are other variables to calculate the lift, but as far as I'm concerned, that's better left for scientists. When our deep well pump was initially installed, there was a small hole drilled in my suction line to allow water to drain out of the pump. If that hole hadn't been there, the water line would have remained filled with water right up to and including the pump head, and that water would have quickly frozen in the winter. The small hole allowed the water to drain back into the well. Then it was a simple matter of pumping a half a dozen pump strokes to get water flowing out again. Even with that hole, if I got too aggressive in my pumping and water slopped out the top and froze, I'd have to take a pot of warm water and pour it over the top of my pump to thaw it out so I could pump it again. Warm water was sufficient. With very hot water, I risked cracking the cast iron pump housing from thermal shock. Yeah, that's never a good thing either. Our hand pump required no power other than the person power to pump the handle. The flow our hand pump produced was surprising. It didn't take long to fill a bucket. What a treat it was on a hot summer's day to pump ice-cold drinking water from the depths of our well. The setup was a simple, reliable way to get water to my homestead. But it sure would have been great if I could somehow have had water available in the house without having to run outside every time to pump a bucket. Even after I got married, we used that outside hand pump for our water. But there came a time when we decided to get really modern and have running water. And I don't mean the kind I had to run outside to fetch either. I decided to install a manually operated hand pitcher pump by the kitchen sink. The trick was how to run the pipe from the sink and tap into the well. It was a bit of work, but this is how I did it. I dug a trench from the well casing and then under the house to where the kitchen sink was situated overhead. This water line would need to be properly insulated and buried. I dug about 3 feet down along the well casing to expose the casing. I needed to install an adapter below the frost line, so I dug down to the appropriate depth. I needed enough room to get a drill with a hole cutter in there. There is a device called a pitless adapter. The pitless adapter makes it possible to tap into the side of an existing well casing in order to run another suction line down into the well. There are a couple readily available sizes, 1 inch and 1.25 inch. Since my piston water pump had a 1.25 inch port and I already had a 1.25 inch PVC pipe, I bought the pitless adapter for this size line. The advantage was I didn't need The advantage was I didn't need to use a reducer down to 1 inch, and the bigger line has a little less flow restriction. Flow restriction would only be an issue on very long runs of pipe. Think of it as trying to suck soda out of a glass with a straw. The bigger the diameter of the straw, the easier it is to draw the soda out of the glass. I bored my hole the required diameter for my adapter. This adapter has 2 pieces to it. One piece slides onto the other piece. It can only go together one way. One piece has a large threaded port with a big nut and at least one rubber seal. The trick is to lower the whole adapter down into the well casing and slip the threaded end through the drilled hole so that the big nut can go on to attach the adapter. This was an operation that needed to be done right, lest I drop the assembly and it fall to the bottom of the well. See, that would have sucked. You'll note the back half of the adapter has two smaller threaded ports. One end is closed off, and the other is an opening that will allow water to flow through the adapter. The end that is blocked is for installation only, sorry.
Speaking the truth.
Hang on, guys. My throat's getting all funky because of my sinuses. Okay. One end is closed off and the other is an opening that will allow water to flow through the adapter. The end that is blocked is for installation only. I needed a long enough piece of threaded pipe, galvanized or PVC, doesn't matter, that I could screw into that end. A piece of pipe threaded on both ends, 6 to 8 feet in length, was sufficient. If I had to do this over again, I would add fittings to make a T handle in case I lost my grip on the pipe and everything headed down to the bottom of the well. With a T handle wider than the well casing diameter, if I lost my grip, it would have stopped at the top of the well and I could avoid a disaster. Another good reason for making a T handle dedicated installer is if I ever need to access the pitless adapter in the future, I can use the T-pipe by reversing the installation procedure to separate the adapter again. The T handle can be made easy enough with a T fitting and a couple of threaded 6-inch nipples, one on each side of the T. I slid the assembly down the well casing. When I had the adapter aligned with a new hole I drilled through my well casing, I gingerly pushed it through the hole from the inside of the casing, and then I was able to put the rubber washer and nut on from the outside to lock it in place. If there are two rubber washers, one should go on the inside and one should go on the outside of the casing, essentially sandwiching the casing. I now had a sealed adapter going through the side of my well casing. I pulled up on the pipe, and the back part of the adapter slid up and off, leaving the attached front part in place. I brought that to the surface. Don't you open that.
My hand's just here. I'm not going to open it.
Okay. I brought that to the surface and then connected my drop-down suction tube, which went into the well water. I made sure that the suction line was long enough to remain in the water regardless of seasonal fluctuations or drawdown. I also made sure I had a foot valve attached to the end of my suction line. One very important point here. The suction line on a shallow well hand pump must have a foot valve attached to its end. The foot valve will remain submerged in the well water. A foot valve is simply a device that will allow water to flow one way only. You want to be able to draw water up into your suction line but prevent it from draining back out. If you lose suction and or water doesn't seem to be staying in your water line, it's likely due to a leaking foot valve that is not sealing properly. Probably due to a little dirt on the seal. I've taken foot valves apart and cleaned them, so it's not always necessary to replace it. Having a spare foot valve is always handy though. That will be a recurring theme as we go along. Spare parts. They have come in handy over the years. Continuing on, I slid the suction line back half of the pitless adapter back down the well using the installation pipe and repositioned the adapter back onto the first half. I could visually make sure they were mated and seated properly. After I was assured the two pieces of the pitless adapter were seated properly, I unscrewed my pipe and removed it from the well. Once my water line was connected at the well casing to the pitless adapter and the run was made up into the house and connected to the pitcher pump, it was a matter of priming the pump and pumping vigorously until enough suction could be generated to lift the water from the well, fill the water line and pitcher pump chamber, and voila, running water, sort of. It sure beat having to go outside to fetch buckets of water for cooking, cleaning, and laundry. We become a 2-water pump family. Progress. Many times a pump needs to be primed. Every pump I've ever used for water had leather cups. The leather cups are what creates the vacuum to suck water. They are located in the pump chamber. Depending on the pump type and manufacturer, it should be pretty easy to disassemble the pump to access the leathers. Part of preparing a new pump or a pump that has not been used for a long time is to soak the leathers in water so that they will swell and become soft and supple. The wet leather conforms to the pump chamber to make it a tighter seal, hence better suction. I always inventory spare leathers in a pump rebuild kit. And that was it for that. So I'm going to go ahead and get off from here, and I will upload this. That was the beginning of Chapter 5, Homestead Water and Drilled Wells and Hand Pumps. So I will go ahead and get off from here, and I'll upload this, and I will see you guys in a little bit on the next video. Remember to check your subscriptions, guys. Always check those. Hit that notification bell and click on all to make sure you get all of the notifications. I will see you guys in the next video. Remember to do your research, you guys. Bye, guys.